The Stanley Hotel has a new photo to help support its haunted reputation. A man from Houston recently visited Estes Park and, well, he took this photo in which he sees something paranormal in the panoramic of the lobby.
What if the hotel room you booked for a romantic getaway was not empty when you arrived? What if the strange sounds you heard in the hallway were not coming from other guests? And what if, in the middle of the night, you opened your door and found a child standing silently in the corridor, only to discover that someone or something was waiting for you back inside the room? This is the story surrounding Room 217 at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, one of the most famous hotels associated with paranormal legends in the United States. The hotel became even more famous after author Stephen King stayed there and later drew inspiration from the experience for his novel, The Shining. But the story of Room 217 is older than the book, and according to the legend, it begins with a woman named Elizabeth Wilson. The Stanley Hotel opened in 1909 in Estes Park, Colorado. From the beginning, the hotel developed a reputation for strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and stories of ghostly encounters. Among all its rooms, one became particularly famous, Room 217. The reason dates back to an incident involving Elizabeth Wilson, a housekeeper who worked at the hotel. According to historical accounts, Wilson was preparing Room 217 when a gas explosion occurred. The blast seriously damaged part of the room, but remarkably, Wilson survived. The room was eventually repaired. Wilson continued working at the hotel, and according to the legend, that was not the end of her connection with Room 217. Years later, guests began reporting unusual experiences associated with the room. Some claimed that objects seemed to move by themselves. Others reported hearing strange sounds or feeling an unexplained presence. Eventually, stories began circulating that Wilson's spirit still remained connected to the room. But here's where the legend becomes even more unsettling. Imagine arriving at a beautiful mountain hotel expecting peace, privacy, and a romantic weekend. Instead, you discover that your room may have a history you never knew about. That is exactly the kind of story that has made Room 217 so famous. One account tells of a couple who stayed at the Stanley Hotel and were given Room 217. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The room appeared clean and perfectly normal. The hotel itself was quiet, and there were not many guests around. The couple settled in, unpacked their belongings, and tried to enjoy their stay. Then the atmosphere changed. One of them began feeling as though they were being watched. There was no obvious reason for the feeling. No one was standing in the room. The door was closed. Nothing appeared to be moving, yet the sense of another presence became difficult to ignore. Then came the sounds. They reportedly heard noises that seemed to come from outside the room. At one point, they believed they could hear children playing somewhere nearby. But there was something strange about it. It was late at night. The hotel was almost completely silent, and when they checked the hallway, there was nobody there. That should have been enough to make anyone uncomfortable. But the most frightening moment allegedly came later. During the night, one of them woke suddenly after hearing what sounded like a woman's voice close by. The room was dark. Everything appeared normal. But then the sounds of children returned. The guest looked at the clock. It was around 2 in the morning. Who would be playing in a hotel corridor at that hour? Curiosity eventually overcame fear, and the door was opened. The hallway was empty. No children, no guests, nothing. But according to the story, while looking down the corridor, the guest noticed something unusual, a small child standing in the distance. The child did not speak. She simply stood there, watching. The guest reportedly moved closer, trying to understand what was happening. And then came the moment that turned the strange experience into something terrifying. A scream came from inside Room 217. The guest rushed back. Inside, the other person appeared to be struggling with the figure of an elderly woman. The figure seemed to disappear near the window. Whether this was a paranormal encounter, a nightmare, a misunderstanding, or something else entirely, there is no reliable evidence proving that such an event happened exactly as the legend describes. And that distinction matters. Because the Stanley Hotel's ghost stories have been repeated for decades, and stories often become more dramatic every time they are retold. But there are real historical events behind some of the hotel's legends, and Room 217 is certainly not the only place that has attracted attention. Other rooms, including 401, 407, and 428, have also become associated with paranormal stories. Guests have claimed to hear unexplained noises, see unusual figures, or experience objects apparently moving without explanation. The hotel itself has embraced its haunted reputation, becoming a destination for people fascinated by paranormal history. And then there is Stephen King. In the 1970s, King and his wife stayed at the Stanley Hotel shortly before it closed for the winter season. The hotel was almost empty. According to King, the isolated surroundings and eerie atmosphere affected his imagination deeply. He later developed the idea for The Shining, the famous novel about a family staying at an isolated hotel. The fictional Overlook Hotel is not a direct copy of the Stanley Hotel, but King's experience there clearly became part of the inspiration behind the story. There is an especially memorable detail from King's stay. He and his wife were staying in room 217. That same room, the room surrounded by decades of stories about unexplained activity. King later described waking from a disturbing dream during that stay, an experience that helped inspire the opening ideas for The Shining. And suddenly, the reputation of room 217 reached an entirely different level. But there is another famous story connected to the Stanley Hotel. Actor Jim Carrey reportedly stayed there while filming Dumb and Dumber in Colorado. According to stories repeated over the years, Carrey left the hotel unexpectedly after experiencing something disturbing. However, many details of that story remain unverified, and Carrey has not provided a clear public account confirming the paranormal claims. That is one of the most important things to remember when exploring haunted places. There are stories, there are eyewitness accounts, there are historical records, and then there are legends that grow with every retelling. They should not all be treated as the same thing. Still, the atmosphere of the Stanley Hotel is undeniably unusual. Picture the location: a historic hotel surrounded by the Rocky Mountains, long corridors, old rooms, wooden floors, cold mountain nights, and a building that has existed for more than a century. Even without ghosts, an environment like that can make the imagination work overtime. Every creaking floorboard suddenly sounds like footsteps. Every shadow seems to move. Every unexplained noise becomes a question. And when you already know the stories associated with a particular room, your mind becomes even more alert. That may explain some experiences, but it does not explain everything people claim to have encountered. And perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what makes room 217 so fascinating. Because if someone tells you they saw a ghost, you can always question what they saw. Maybe it was a shadow. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe there was an ordinary explanation that was simply overlooked. But then another person tells a similar story, and another, and another. At what point does coincidence become something worth investigating? That question has kept the legend of Room 217 alive for generations. Today, people still visit the Stanley Hotel knowing its history. Some come because they love The Shining. Some come because they are fascinated by paranormal stories. And some simply want to experience the atmosphere for themselves. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is something powerful about standing inside a place that has accumulated more than a century of stories. Because haunted places are not only about spirits, they are also about memory. Every generation adds another story. Every strange sound becomes part of the legend. And eventually, the building itself becomes famous for the stories people tell about it. So the next time you book a hotel room, maybe take a moment to learn something about its history. Not because you should expect to encounter something supernatural, but because you never know what happened in the place where you are about to spend the night. And if the hotel has a room with a reputation like Room 217, you might think twice before turning off the lights. Because sometimes the most frightening question isn't, "Is there a ghost in this room?" It's simply, "What happened here before I arrived?" If you enjoyed this journey into one of America's most famous haunted hotel legends, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mystery. And tell us in the comments, would you actually spend one night in room 217 if you were given the chance?